Barron Trump's Secret Sanctuary, a story of animal rescue. The woods behind Barron's house were his refuge, a place where the world's noise faded into the rustle of leaves and the chatter of squirrels. At 17, Barron was taller than most kids his age, with a lanky frame that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the sky. His quiet demeanor and sharp blue eyes often made people assume he was aloof, but the truth was simpler. Barron preferred the company of the forest to the chaos of high school hallways. In the woods, he could breathe. In the woods, he could be himself. And in the woods, he had built something extraordinary, a secret sanctuary for animals who had nowhere else to go. It started 2 years ago, when Barron was 15 and still adjusting to life in a small, affluent town in Florida, far from the spotlight that had followed his family for years. His childhood had been filled with pets. Dogs that bounded through manicured lawns, cats that curled up on velvet cushions, even a parakeet that sang off-key in his bedroom. Each one had left a mark on him, their unconditional love a quiet anchor in a world that often felt unsteady. But it was a stray dog, a scruffy mutt with matted fur and soulful eyes, that changed everything. Barron had found her shivering under a park bench one rainy afternoon, her ribs stark against her skin. He'd been walking home from school, his backpack heavy with books he barely cared about, when he saw her. Most people would have kept walking. Barron stopped. He crouched down, ignoring the rain soaking his hoodie, and extended a hand. The dog flinched but didn't run. After a few minutes of soft words and patience, she let him touch her. That night, he snuck her into the garage, fed her scraps from dinner, and named her Daisy. By morning, he knew he couldn't let her go back to the streets, but Daisy wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, Barron began noticing strays everywhere, a tabby cat hiding in an alley, a rabbit abandoned in a cardboard box, a raccoon limping from a run-in with a car. Each one tugged at something deep inside him, a need to protect what couldn't protect itself. His family's sprawling property backed onto a dense stretch of woods, and it didn't take long for Barron to realize it was the perfect place to hide his growing menagerie. He started small, clearing a patch of underbrush and building a makeshift shelter from old pallets and tarps. He scavenged supplies, blankets from thrift stores, bowls from garage sales, dog food bought with his allowance. Soon, the sanctuary was more than a daydream. It was real. By the fall of his junior year, the sanctuary was home to 8 animals: Daisy the dog, a one-eyed cat named Pirate, a pair of rabbits called Thumper and Clover, a raccoon he dubbed Bandit, 2 stray kittens, and a crow with a broken wing he called Shadow. Barron spent every spare moment there, slipping away after school to check on them, clean their space, and make sure they were safe. He'd learned how to splint a wing, treat fleas, and even stitch a wound from YouTube videos and an old veterinary manual he'd found at a library sale. The animals trusted him, and that trust felt like a gift he didn't deserve but cherished anyway. The sanctuary was a secret, though, and Barron guarded it fiercely. He wasn't sure how his family would react. His parents were busy, their lives a whirlwind of obligations, and he didn't want to burden them with his project. At school, he kept to himself, blending into the background with his head down and his earbuds in. The other kids didn't know what to make of him. He was the tall, quiet guy who never joined clubs or went to parties, the one who always seemed to be somewhere else in his mind. If they'd known about the sanctuary, they might have seen him differently. But Barron wasn't ready to share it. Not yet. The trouble started in late September, when the weather turned restless. Florida's hurricane season was in full swing, and the news was buzzing with warnings about a storm brewing in the Atlantic. Barron didn't pay much attention at first. He was too busy reinforcing the sanctuary's shelters, stacking sandbags around the edges to keep out the rain. But one afternoon, as he hauled a bag of kibble through the woods, he heard voices. Not the usual sounds of hikers or dog walkers, but kids, his age, loud and careless, crashing through the underbrush. Barron froze, his heart pounding. He ducked behind a tree, clutching the kibble bag like a shield. The voices grew closer, and he recognized them. Jake Miller and his crew, the kind of guys who ruled the school with smirks and swagger. Jake was a senior, broad-shouldered and loud, the star of the lacrosse team and the kind of person who never noticed Barron unless it was to make a snide comment. With him were Mia Torres, a sharp-tongued girl who ran the school newspaper, and Ethan Chen, a tech geek who followed Jake like a shadow. "Dude, I'm telling you, I saw him come out here," Jake was saying, his voice carrying over the snap of twigs. "He's always sneaking off after school. Gotta be up to something weird." Mia laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Maybe he's got a secret girlfriend. Or, like, a meth lab." Ethan snorted. "Barron? A meth lab? He's too boring for that." Barron's grip tightened on the bag. He didn't care what they thought of him, but if they found the sanctuary, everything he'd built could fall apart. He held his breath, willing them to turn back. But they didn't. They kept moving closer, their flashlight beams slicing through the dusk. Daisy, sensing the intrusion, let out a low growl from her shelter. Barron's stomach dropped. "Hey, you hear that?" Jake said, stopping. "What was that?" Before Barron could think, he stepped out from behind the tree, blocking their path. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice steady but cold. Jake blinked, surprised, then grinned. "Well, look who it is." "What's up, Barron? You got a clubhouse out here or what?" "None of your business," Barron said, crossing his arms. "This is private property." Mia raised an eyebrow, her phone already out, probably recording. "Chill, man. We're just exploring. Didn't know you owned the woods." "I don't," Barron said, "but you're trespassing. Go back." Jake took a step closer, his grin fading. "What's your deal, huh? You hiding something?" Barron didn't flinch, but his mind raced. If they found the animals, they could tell someone: parents, teachers, animal control. The sanctuary wasn't exactly legal, and he hadn't figured out permits or zoning laws. He needed to get them out of here. Just then, Shadow the crow cawed loudly from his perch, drawing their attention. Mia's eyes lit up. "Is that a bird? Like, a pet bird?" Barron hesitated. He could lie, but they'd already heard Daisy and Shadow. If he played this wrong, they'd keep digging. So he made a choice. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I take care of some animals out here. Strays, mostly. They don't have anywhere else to go." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Wait, like a zoo? That's kinda cool." "It's not a zoo," Barron snapped. "It's a sanctuary. And it's a secret. You can't tell anyone." Jake laughed, but there was less malice in it now. "A secret animal sanctuary? Dude, that's straight out of a movie." Mia lowered her phone, her expression softening. "Why's it a secret? That sounds like something people would want to help with." Barron shook his head. "People don't always understand. They'd shut it down. The animals need this place." The three of them exchanged looks. Barron braced himself for mockery, but instead, Mia said, "Can we see it?" He didn't want to say yes. Every instinct screamed to send them away. But they'd already seen too much, and if he refused, they'd come back on their own. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Fine. But you follow my rules. No pictures, no telling anyone. And you help if I ask." Jake smirked. "What, like volunteer?" "I'm not scooping poop, man." "Then leave," Barron said flatly. Mia elbowed Jake. "Shut up, Jake. We'll follow the rules. Right, Ethan?" Ethan nodded eagerly, his eyes wide with curiosity. Jake shrugged, still smirking but clearly intrigued. Barron led them through the trees to the clearing where the sanctuary stood, a patchwork of shelters, fenced pens, and a small shed he'd built from scrap wood. Daisy bounded over, tail wagging, while Pirate watched warily from a perch. The kittens tumbled out of their crate, mewing, and Bandit the raccoon peered from his den. "Holy crap," Ethan whispered. "This is awesome." Mia knelt to pet Daisy, who licked her hand. "How long have you been doing this?" 2 years, Barron said, watching them carefully. "Started with Daisy. Kept going." Jake whistled. "You're like some kind of animal whisperer. Why didn't you tell anyone?" Barron shrugged. "Didn't need to." They spent the next hour exploring the sanctuary, asking questions Barron answered in short, careful sentences. He showed them how he'd rigged a rainwater collection system for drinking water, how he'd built the shelters to withstand wind, and how he tracked each animal's health in a battered notebook. To his surprise, they didn't mock him. Mia seemed genuinely impressed, Ethan was fascinated by the logistics, and even Jake looked grudgingly respectful. As they left, Mia turned back. "You're gonna need help with that storm coming," she said. "We'll come back tomorrow, okay?" Barron wanted to say no, but the weather reports were getting worse. A tropical storm was bearing down, maybe even a hurricane. The sanctuary wasn't ready for that kind of weather. He nodded. "Tomorrow. But you keep it quiet." The next day, the sky was a heavy gray, the air thick with the promise of rain. Barron was at the sanctuary by dawn, reinforcing the shelters with plywood and duct tape. He'd barely slept, worrying about the animals. Daisy sensed his tension and stayed close, her warm body pressed against his leg as he worked. Around noon, Mia, Ethan, and Jake showed up, carrying bags of supplies, tarps, rope, even a few bags of pet food. Barron raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you get all this?" "Borrowed some stuff from my dad's garage," Jake said, tossing a coil of rope onto the ground. "And Mia's mom works at the pet store. She got us a discount." Mia grinned. "Don't worry, we didn't say anything about this place. Just said it was for a school project." Barron didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to people helping him, not without wanting something in return. "Thanks," he muttered, turning back to the shelters. They worked all afternoon, hammering boards, securing tarps, and moving the animals to the sturdiest shelter, a shed Barron had reinforced with cinder blocks. Mia was surprisingly good with the animals, calming the kittens with gentle scratches, while Ethan rigged a makeshift windbreak from old crates. Jake, despite his grumbling, hauled heavy supplies without complaint. Barron watched them, a strange warmth growing in his chest. For the first time, the sanctuary didn't feel like his alone. As the wind picked up, whistling through the trees, Barron gathered them in the shed. The animals were huddled together, Daisy curled around the kittens, Pirate perched on a shelf, Bandit tucked into a corner. Shadow's cage was secured against the wall, the crow's dark eyes glinting in the dim light. "The storm's gonna hit tonight," Barron said, checking his phone for the latest update. "They're saying Category 1, maybe 2. We need to make sure everything holds." Mia nodded, her usual sarcasm gone. "What can we do?" Barron handed out tasks, Ethan to check the anchors on the tarps, Jake to stack more sandbags, Mia to make sure the animals had enough food and water. He took the hardest job himself, climbing onto the shed's roof to secure a loose panel. The wind was stronger now, tugging at his jacket, but he worked quickly, driven by the thought of the animals depending on him. By nightfall, the storm was roaring. Rain lashed the sanctuary, and the wind howled like a living thing. The four of them crowded into the shed, surrounded by the animals, listening to the creak of the walls. Daisy whimpered, and Barron stroked her head, whispering, "It's okay, girl. We're gonna be fine." Ethan, usually so talkative, was quiet, his eyes wide as he clutched a flashlight. "You think this place will hold?" he asked. "It has to," Barron said simply. Mia glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You really care about these animals, don't you?" Barron didn't answer right away. He looked at Daisy, at Pirate's steady gaze, at the kittens sleeping soundly despite the storm. "They're family," he said finally. They don't have anyone else. Jake, leaning against the wall, spoke up. You're kinda intense, you know that. But this is. I don't know. It's cool. Most people wouldn't do this. Barron shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. Doesn't matter what most people would do. The storm raged for hours, shaking the shed, rattling the tarps. At one point, a branch crashed against the roof, and Ethan yelped. But the sanctuary held. Barron's careful work, combined with the help from his unexpected allies, had made it strong enough to weather the worst. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world of dripping leaves and scattered debris. The sanctuary was battered but intact. One of the smaller shelters had collapsed and a tarp had torn loose, but the animals were safe. Barron stepped outside, breathing in the clean, rain-washed air, and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Mia, Ethan, and Jake followed him, surveying the damage. We did it, Mia said, a grin breaking across her face. We actually saved this place. Barron nodded, managing a small smile. Yeah. Thanks to you guys. Jake clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture that would have felt impossible a day ago. You're alright, Barron. Weird, but alright. Ethan was already poking at the collapsed shelter. We can rebuild this, right? I've got some ideas for making it stronger. Barron looked at them, these three people who'd stumbled into his secret and stayed to help. He'd spent so long keeping the sanctuary hidden, convinced no one would understand. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe there were people who could share this with him, who could see what he saw in the animals' trusting eyes. All right, he said, his voice steady. Let's rebuild. But it's still a secret. Deal? Deal, Mia said, and the others nodded. Over the next few weeks, the sanctuary became a group effort. Mia started a donation drive at school, passing it off as a vague animal welfare project to keep the secret. Ethan designed a better water system, rigging pipes from spare parts. Jake, to everyone's surprise, turned out to be good with the animals, especially Bandit, who followed him around like a shadow. Barron taught them what he knew, from cleaning wounds to mixing feed, and they listened, eager to learn. The sanctuary grew, too. They took in a new stray, a skinny hound they named Stormy in honor of the night they'd banded together. Barron watched it all, his quiet leadership guiding them, his compassion the heart of the sanctuary. He still preferred the woods to the school hallways, but now, when he walked through the trees, he wasn't alone. He had Daisy, Pirate, Shadow, and the others, and now, he had friends. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Barron sat on a stump, watching the animals settle in for the night. Mia sat beside him, sketching the sanctuary in a notebook. You ever think about telling more people? She asked. This place could be big. Barron shook his head. It's not about being big. It's about them. He nodded toward the animals, their soft sounds filling the air. As long as they're safe, that's enough. Mia smiled. You're a good guy, Barron. Don't let anyone tell you different. He didn't reply, but the warmth in his chest grew a little stronger. The sanctuary was still a secret, but it wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to the animals, to the woods, and now, to the small group of kids who'd chosen to protect it with him. And that, Barron thought, was more than enough.